So how do we make e-commerce successful for our clients? It's a very broad question. What we do is we try to take a step back and go back to our clients with an end-to-end solution. So that basically involves us understanding the opportunity, the potential within the category that they may be operating in. So for example, if you look at retail at large as a category, we size up the opportunity within retail as a sector. Then we go back to our clients with what kind of an approach should they be prioritizing. So whether they want to do a D2C approach, which is to trade directly to consumers, or would they want to partner with other marketplaces in the industry. So we look at all of the pros and cons of the approaches, and we go back to our clients with their go-to-market strategy. So once that upstream consultative work has been done, then we also do a lot of work along the lines of downstream delivery. So we size up the opportunity from an activation point of view. We look at all of the platforms that a client should be investing in that has the highest affinity across the target groups. We reverse engineer their investments in terms of, if you spend X amount of money, how would that benefit, or how would that impact in the outcome that we are all chasing, and so on. So to summarize the answer, we basically go back to our clients with an end-to-end solution. When you look at some of the highlights, or trends in the e-com sector in the region, I think it's exciting times to be here in the region because, over the last couple of years or so, e-commerce has been at the forefront of a lot of discussions, right? We know that retail at large as a sector has been in decline, if not stagnating, and e-com has provided an opportunity as an alternative avenue for a lot of brands for that incremental growth, although quite small. So we know that e-commerce is estimated to be at about $10 billion when we look at the retail sector at large as a percentage of retail investments. And we know that the region has the ingredients, all of the right ingredients in terms of, you look at technology adoption, you look at the purchase journey, the shopping journey starts online for a lot of the consumers. You look at discovery of products increasingly happening from smartphones, and smartphones is another area where this region has one of the highest penetration rates globally. So from a digital connectivity point of view, from a smartphone technology adoption point of view, we are checking all of the boxes. However, when it comes to e-com adoption, despite $10 billion being a sizable number, we are still at 2% of the total retail spend in the region. But this region is also tipped to grow much faster than a lot of other developed markets globally, growing at about 40% year on year for the next 3 years. And what we're seeing is that trends, there are obviously many things to look at. So one is that that shopping behavior is moving into the online channels increasingly because of all of the advancements in the infrastructure. Secondly, what we're seeing is that consumers are becoming a lot more savvy in terms of discovering products, right? So if we are starting to see the emergence of social platforms as a fulfillment means, so which is a lot of the transactions are starting to happen natively within social platforms. So when you look at markets like China, you see 30% of all successful transactions happen natively within social platforms. So we have all of the indicators for us to move in a very similar fashion, yet a lot of the monetizable products that you see, for example, Instagram shopping is not available yet, but you see a lot of e-com transactions already starting to happen within social platforms natively. So we see that as a massive trend moving forward. The third one is, I obviously echoed the importance of smartphones and looking at mobile at the heart of everything that we do. But then there's the other school of thought whereby a lot of the brands are also seeing that whilst app marketing is extremely important and revenue contribution for a lot of these pure players as well as omnichannel brands is increasingly coming from the smartphones, but the future may not necessarily require an app. For example, we are looking at technology and advancements along the lines of progressive mobile webs, which means that you can have exact same experience as an app without having to invest in having an app for Android phones and iOS phones and so on. So that's another interesting, very exciting area to look at in the future. The third one is, the role of video within the e-com space, and I feel that content at large is one of the most understated areas when it comes to driving, transactional fulfillment online. And we are seeing that some of the brands are, starting to invest in that area of doing product shots, and animated content and so on. So we're seeing that. And then the fourth area, which is very, intertwined to, content marketing, is the rise of influencer marketing. So we're seeing a lot of the pure players and e-commerce businesses are partnering with influencers to drive that scale in terms of, traction for the e-commerce platforms. I don't see that way, right? So we know that, Facebook, Instagram combined together represent more than 90 million active users in the region. You've got Snapchat as another very fast growing social network with active usage of about 10 million and above, right? So I don't see there is any distinction between small sized or brand sized businesses. I think the economic pressures are such that every other business is chasing growth and incrementality, and wherever that growth may be coming from, whether it is from Facebook, Instagram, or any other form of traditional media, that's what brands are investing and prioritizing their investments in. Look, we would like to model the MENA region along the lines of markets like India, right, who have gone through a very similar cycle as what MENA is currently going through. So if you look at India, when Amazon did not exist in that market, the e-com growth was around 35 to 40%, 3 years leading into the inception of Amazon. And from the time Amazon hit the market, the growth accelerated to up to 75 to 80%. And this is exactly what we are seeing, that over the last 2 to 3 years, although starting off on a very small base, we've been growing anywhere between 35 to 40%. But over the next 3 years, we're expecting our growth to grow from $10 billion to $30 billion. So I think Amazon really would help accelerate the overall market, and not just Amazon. We're seeing the influx of a lot of Chinese e-commerce players into the market. There's also another wave of Turkish players into the region as well. So what it does is, more competition means good for the consumers, because it will drive down price. But more importantly, there are a lot of other elements that I think that these companies such as Noon, Namshi, Amazons of the world, you've got Jolishi, and so on, and a lot of the other omni-channel players as well, Landmark being one of our clients. We've got Azadia as well, who are continuing to invest in the infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, it doesn't just mean investment in technology, it also means investment in fulfillment of orders, right? So customer experience is detrimental to success, right? If you look at, we did a study a few months ago where 6 out of 10 consumers were unhappy with the fulfillment model across a number of e-commerce players, right? So customer services, brands who are investing in customer service are the brand that will continue to do well. Then you're looking at SKU range, right? So as an example, if you look at Amazon in the region, they've got about roughly 8.5 to 9 million SKUs listed on their platform. Compare that with Amazon in the US, you've got about 850 million plus, right? So what we're trying to get to is that a lot of the brands will also have to invest from a supply chain point of view as well, and make sure that they have exact same, if not more, SKU range available on their digital assets. We are basically seeing that there are very distinct behaviors in the marketplace, right? The economic pressure has meant that the demand for growth is even more so than it was in the past. And every other marketer has now, assumed the role of a performance marketer, where every dollar is investigated against its impact on the bottom line. And therefore, we're seeing that a lot of the brands are shifting into either investing at an upper funnel level, right? I hate to call it a funnel because the consumer journey is no longer linear, but either there's money being spent on building equity and building awareness and so on, but we're seeing increasingly shift of money into the bottom end of the funnel to drive consideration, to drive trial, to drive sales. As a result of which, what does it mean for the industry? You're seeing a lot of the platforms who who are good at managing the bottom end of the funnel, benefiting from that shift in behavior, right? So for example, when any brand launches an e-commerce platform, search is by default a line item in their flow charts. And any other platform, social platforms that we've talked about, programmatic channels, we've looked at affiliate marketing and so on, are representing bigger chunks of money just because they're able to deliver against conversions versus any other platforms that deliver on building awareness, equity, and so on. So we're seeing that clear, distinct behavior in terms of how the money is shifting into the bottom end of the funnel, one. Two is, it's also weeding out a lot of poor practice, bad practice from the marketplace. So now, because there is greater accountability on every dollar spent, which means that every media partner has to step forward, put their skin into the game, and then ensure that the money that an advertiser or an agency is investing on their platforms is delivering against the expectations and KPIs. So we're seeing a lot of bad practice being weeded out. The third one is we're also seeing that there is a stronger alignment of KPIs to business KPIs, right? So, this industry is fantastic whereby, we're all living in a very complicated world. You've got many, platforms out there, as a result of which we sometimes, get drawn under a sea of metrics. So now with this pressure to drive growth, we are seeing a clear direction to focus on business KPI. So for every dollar that we invest, how does this impact your volume of transactions? How does that impact cost per transaction? How does that impact your customer lifetime value? So we are seeing a clear alignment of KPIs towards business KPIs. There are plenty of opportunities for content creators, right? Content creation is another area of the industry that needs a fair bit of regulation, because today content creation comes from many different places. You've got content creation from your production houses, you've got creation of content from influencers, you've got creation of content driven by agencies through in-housing capabilities and so on. I think before we talk about how can they best drive success, let's just look at the content creation landscape, right? Today we're seeing many different sources through which content is being created, right? Content is created in-house across, clients and agencies. Content is also created by a lot of traditional, conventional production houses who, if in the past were producing content for TV broadcasting, are now producing content for YouTube, for Snapchat, for Insta, and so on. And then you've got a lot of content being co-created in partnership with influencers. So I think we need to understand, first of all, what are we trying to achieve out of that piece of content, right? And then understand who do we need to partner with to build that piece of content. And then last but not least, we need to identify the right measurement metrics around that piece of content, because today when we co-create content with influencers, is this about engagement around that piece of content, or is this about getting that successful transaction on a client's e-commerce platform? So I think my focus is not so much around who do we partner with, because I think when you have the right processes in place, when you have the right people at play, you will get to that outcome very, very, very quickly. But I think the hard part is to understand what measurement framework to apply. Are you going to assess that piece of content around just absolute viewership of that piece of content on Instagram, or are you going to assess the performance of that content against the qualified traffic they drove, against the volume of transactions they drove, against the contribution to the revenue and so on. So I believe, to answer the question, content is an important area. A lot of the brands that we work with have upped their investments in that space. We just need to make sure that we marry the content to the right outcomes that we're working towards. Back in Q4 of 2017, we looked at the white space in the marketplace. We looked at a number of pain points across our clients wanting to move into the e-commerce space. So what we wanted to do was to help for three things. We wanted to help clients become commerce ready. We wanted to help simplify the complex for them, because selling online doesn't mean just investing in technology and selling it from day one onwards. It requires a lot of investments in terms of reorganization, identifying the stakeholders in terms of who's responsible for that, who's responsible for technology selection, who's responsible for implementation of technology, who's managing your data play, who's managing your activation. Is this all driven by a separate e-com team, or does this all fall within the marketing function and so on? So we've learned from some of our clients in terms of what models are working the best, and therefore we looked at simplifying the complexity for them, and last but not least, helping them transact better. So that was the three objectives that we wanted to launch Transact with. And then along the way, we have iterated a blueprint in terms of how can we help our clients accelerate adoption of e-commerce. So we said we want to help our clients when they want to do sell directly to consumers. So when they have a D2C approach, how can we help them from a technology selection point of view? How can we help them from a development of the platform point of view? And then we looked at experience management. So how do we help them manage the experience with consumers both on-site as well as off-site? So if you look at things like SEO, again, another area, very understated area of the industry. So how do we grow qualified traffic organically through a managed service? Then we look at personalization and so on. So that was that. And then when clients decide not to do D2C, how can we help them move into the e-com space through marketplace partnerships? So we leverage our partnerships with some of the leading marketplaces in the region and help our clients manage their footprint on these marketplaces to drive that scale and incrementality and so on. And last but not least, when you combine D2C and marketplaces, you look at an omni-channel approach. So we work with some of our retail businesses to help deliver on that singular view of the consumers. How do we bridge the gap between offline and the digital world to look at consumers holistically, and not just that from a planning point of view, but we also help them measure omni-channel shopping. Some of the new trends that we're seeing in the region is the growing role of app marketing in the region. So we know that the discovery of products and services is happening increasingly through apps in the region. And a lot of that is also driven through very high smartphone penetration rates that we see in the region. So in markets like Saudi Arabia, UAE and Kuwait, we're seeing almost anywhere between 85% to 90%. So that very high adoption of smartphone is fueling that behavior of people looking at smartphones as a means to discover new products and services. So we're seeing that as a pretty hot trend. I won't call it a trend, but it is a behavior that is implicating the businesses in a big way. The second one is the growing role of social, as a number of social platforms become even more shoppable through the rollout of their own native shopping solutions. You've got Instagram, Snapchat, shoppable lenses, and so on. That means that a lot of the fulfillment moving forward will happen natively, right? So if you look at markets like China, up to 30% of successful transactions happen natively within social environments. So I think we are set up for a very similar future, just because you have all of the right dynamics pointing towards that direction. The third one is again, video marketing. So we're seeing the role of video in driving transactions. A lot of the brands are looking at doing product shots, for example, in a video format, snackable content, and just really pushing that needle to leverage video assets across the entire ecosystem to drive that transaction, on their platforms.